get the deal done with this proposal?
No. Let me tell you why not. Number one, it puts a border on the island of Ireland because Northern Ireland is in the UK Customs Union and Ireland is in the EU Customs Union. So it violates the first thing that Barnier said in your short interview with him. And number two, the technology to deal with this is not in place. It's all based on kind of computers and GPS and stuff. It just does not exist and is not going to be accepted. Number three is it gives a veto on the whole process to the Northern Ireland Parliament, which hasn't sat for 1,000 days, which is dominated by the DUP, which has just got out of bed with the Conservative Party, and there is no way that that would ever be accepted. And number four is it actually creates a non-aligned economic zone north and south of the border, which is completely at variance with what the EU has set out in the backstop agreement. So my feeling is this is, I'm not saying it's a complete sham because it moved forward on one particular point. It previously was to apply only to agricultural and food products. Now it embraces all products. So Boris did widen the scope, but the actual ins and outs of it are unlikely to work.
And David, I'm curious specifically about your point on the technology involved with trying to get away from what I understand. They're trying to avoid those long lines at the actual border in terms of customs checks. But didn't Theresa May try something very similar, talking about the use of technology in customs patrolling, and then that was ultimately rejected?
That was rejected. And now it's going to be rejected again because it's the same. And again, it's all talk. There's nothing there. And the result would be to ultimately, and even the Johnson paper says it again, he wouldn't put customs posts at the border, but he would put customs clearance areas close to the border. Well, what's the difference? If you start putting customs posts on the border in Ireland, you have divided Ireland. And that is a great, big no-no for the EU, and therefore not going to happen.
I do wonder, though, David, I mean, what is the worst prospect for Ireland? Because if this deal isn't accepted, as you seem to think it won't be, I mean, they're looking at some serious consequences if it gets to a hard Brexit, aren't they?
They're screwed either way. I mean, if you think about it, we lovely people in Ireland breathe 40,000 head, we kill 40,000 head of cattle a week, and we eat 4,000. And the rest the UK eats, some in Europe, but basically that's it. So if there's no Brexit, what are we going to do with all those poor cattle? And you can go to sheep and you can go to chickens and hens, and it's the same thing. So if there's no Brexit, disaster for the Irish economy. And if there is a Brexit, it's still a very third-rate choice. And particularly if that deal was done on the basis of what Boris Johnson has just put forward. So Ireland really is in a very bad position. It's really a Hobson's choice and very unattractive both ways.
Well, David, looking at pound sterling at the moment, hovering around 123, do you think that investors are still being a bit too complacent, perhaps, about the probabilities of a hard Brexit?
Look, what the investors are really saying is not that this deal is going to go through and blah, 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 because this deal, even if it went through the EU, would probably never go through the British Parliament. What the investors are saying is there's an election down the road. This is really what Boris is aiming at. And when this election comes, he could win it and go straight back to a hard Brexit, in which case sterling would go below 110, probably to parity with the US dollar. And if he loses it and you get the lovely Jeremy Corbyn with the Liberals and Scottish Nationalists, we will then have an ideal kind of government which will be able to do absolutely nothing about anything, including leaving the EU, which is actually not that bad. And then sterling would go to 130. So what you're actually seeing in the sterling market is complete polarization between two completely quite probable binary outcomes. And what does the average investor do with that? He does nothing.